Today on Adventure, we have Rebecca Corbin, who is the CEO of the National Association of Community College Entrepreneurship. And we're going to have a conversation about community colleges and the role of community colleges in the future of work and the impact that they can have in different communities, whether that's in urban areas, rural, or anything in between. And I thought that Rebecca is the perfect person to speak to, not only because she's running this very innovative platform, but she actually gets to see what's out there and what's working and what's not working. So welcome to EdVenture, Rebecca.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah. So you and I have known each other for a while, and I've had the pleasure of actually speaking at one of your conferences, or at least conducting a workshop. And I was really taken back by just the range of people that get to one of your conferences, because it's just not, the usual suspects of community colleges, but it is a range of people who are really thinking differently and finding different practices to deploy on behalf of community colleges. So if you don't mind just telling us a little bit about um, your role yourself, and just how this association is having impact in in our community.
Yeah, I would love to. Like you, I love community colleges. I've worked in the space, working actually for a community college for 6 years in New Jersey. So I
Hmm.
was a vice president of institutional advancement, where I ran the foundation. I oversaw workforce development, career services, some other
Oh,
things.
wow.
And I just really fell in love with how every day was different, but it was really oriented toward serving the students, and just the mission of community colleges of also being open door and serving communities. That that just stole it for me, and I've never wanted to leave this space. And so when I was going into my 6th year working at the community college, I was also finishing up my doctorate at Wilmington University in
Mhm.
Delaware, where I was studying the intersection of entrepreneurship, workforce development, and philanthropy. And I
Right.
was studying a group of community colleges to find out, what were some innovative practices. And as I was doing my research, I kept stumbling across this organization called NACCE, the National
Mm.
Association for Community College Entrepreneurship. And so I would be like, wow, this is really cool. It was not an academic journal, but more of a professional journal,
Yeah.
but it was a sharing. So, kind of long story short, I ended up applying for the job as president and CEO about 10 years ago, and was lucky enough to get the opportunity. So, I have enjoyed this role. It's really a service role. So, our job is really working with community college faculty, deans like you used to be, presidents, foundations, community members, to really drive entrepreneurship and innovation in the classroom, on campus, and in communities.
Wow. Yeah, it's incredible. So with community colleges and just the type of relationships that you've had, do you have like chapters around the country or with different community colleges? I mean, how does community colleges end up getting involved in NACCE?
Yeah, so we were 23 years young, so we're definitely NACCE is in the adult stage of life. But our membership model is pretty simple. A community college can join the association, or sometimes a district or state of community colleges will join. So there's about 1,100 of them across the country. So we have about 30% of them as members. So we look
Wow.
at that being kind of the tip of the spear, the colleges that identify as wanting to be entrepreneurial and innovative, pay a small yearly membership fee of $1,200, and then they engage about 10 people on their campus in the life of our
Wow.
work. And how this has changed over the last several years is the amount of funding that we grant back to our members. So we keep our membership dues affordable, but just for example, the last 3 or 4 years, we've re-granted about $35 million back to colleges
Oh,
to
wow.
engage in programs,
Mm.
to co-create new things. We have an everyday entrepreneur venture fund. So we, try to just not talk about things. We try to
Sure,
go out
sure.
and get resources and help colleges work together, because it's what you said at the top of this discussion about sort of the diversity of our membership. We'll have faculty from one college working alongside a president from another college with a funder and maybe a philanthropist that wants to do something. And that to me is kind of that crazy quilt, the secret sauce that makes NACCE
Yeah,
the vibrant organization that it is.
that's great. So, um, you mentioned entrepreneurship and innovation. So, how does those opportunities show up on campuses of your member participants?
That is a great question. And I kind of liken it to like a treasure hunt. You know, if you're kind of like looking for something, generally you'll find it. So, what we do a lot with our professional development is talk about entrepreneurial mindset, which is really looking for opportunity. And sometimes in the midst of uncertainty and chaos, like you think of the day that we're living through and the last 24 hours, the presidential election in the United States has just flipped on its head. We
Yeah.
kind of thought maybe something like that would happen, but somebody who has an entrepreneurial mindset is going to look at that as opportunity, and they do so intentionally, even if there's risk associated with it.
Yeah.
So, you know, while we begin with entrepreneurial mindset, really what NACCE believes is you've got to take action, right? So whether you take action yourself by experimenting with something, I came across a college a couple of years ago that wanted to do a wellness program, and it was their budget was like the college gave them like $1,000. It was like
Mhm.
virtually no budget, and it was the HR director, a faculty member who had never engaged with HR, and then somebody, I forget, from another organization. These three women decided that they wanted to have their campus be more healthy. So they came together, they'd have coffee in the morning. They went to their president and got $1,000 grant. And what they
Mm.
decided is they wanted people to be more connected on campus. And so they would set up times where people wanted to walk for lunch, bring your tennis shoes, we'll walk around campus. And it kind of snowballed and evolved over time. And then they said, well, maybe we could go out into the community and get a couple
Oh,
sponsors
wow.
to get gift
Yeah.
cards, and we're going to have, you know, a picnic. I mean, I don't know how you feel, but I feel like sometimes innovation and entrepreneurship happens in like the quiet places where you
Absolutely.
see
Yeah.
something needs to be or could be done to make things better. And then somebody, it does not have to be anybody with any kind of a title or leadership role, steps forward. And that's why it's wildly inclusive and it's very empowering, because students themselves sometimes are your best leaders on campus because they are so passionate about the education that they're getting, and they don't know what they don't know. So they're like, oh, okay, well, why couldn't we do this? Because they're not jaded like some of the
No,
rest of us that,
absolutely. And,
you
it's
know, it violates
interesting.
the policy, or we've never done it like that. Have you ever heard a student say that? So
They're
there's a
just ready
lot
to
that,
go. Yeah. It's interesting because I teach a leadership class on adaptive leadership. And one of the things that I'm often speaking to is how leadership is everywhere, that it's not necessarily a title, it's an activity, that can be picked up from any direction, that you see an opportunity to solve a problem. And I'm glad you brought this up because the entrepreneurial mindset um, is something that students do embrace. And when that can be reinforced through the curriculum, where they have a chance to practice this whole idea of experimentation and moving through processes that allows for them to build something, then that's where the talent cultivation takes place. But my question to you is that, we know that community colleges are tremendous opportunities if you were just to evaluate them based on their mission and how the things are written up in terms of their agility. However, the culture sometimes may not necessarily reflect the agility that's actually written into the mission of the college. How do you how not you, but how can we really focus in on driving more of a culture of innovation, starting with the mindset and then moving into different practices on community college campuses?
yeah, that's such a great question. And, you know, I think where real change happens, especially in leaders, because you do a lot of leadership training and
Yeah.
development, is we need to become more aware of ourselves. And by that I mean that, a culture is not just one person, but I think a leader has a huge impact on the culture. And it could be something as simple as, we say what we do and we do what we say. It
Yeah.
could be ways that you sort of evaluate. And, we all have our best selves, and then sometimes we have a bad day. And I think, if we're really trying to drive cultural improvement, we need to also be able to give ourselves that grace that being, an innovative entrepreneurial leader means that you're going to try some things that don't work well, or you might have an unintended consequence of disrupting something that
Yeah.
kind of impedes the culture. But I think, number one, being self-reflected. I think kind of doing an assessment on trust. And, trust is a hard thing to define. But I think on the many, many community colleges that I visited, you get a sense just being around presidents when they're around their faculty and their leadership and their staff, is that person a trusted person? Do people
Sure.
feel open enough to disagree? Or do people feel included in the conversation? Is it one person standing in front that's just talking and not listening to what other people are saying? And I'll give you just a quick example. I was
Sure.
down in Knoxville earlier in the year. I went to a conference and then I drove over to see the NACCE board chair, Dr. Chris Whaley, who's the president of Rhone State. And he's been there for a long time. He's very much got a servant leader mentality.
Mm.
And they had just come through graduation the week before, so everybody was exhausted. So it was kind of working around my schedule because I was around that area. And one thing that impressed me was we were doing kind of a prep training to some other kinds of things that they were doing around being more inclusive, which, is something that's important. And
Absolutely.
a woman stood up and like just said, she was on the staff, so she knew him. And she said, well, we say this, but we don't do this. And I was just really impressed because it was her opinion for one thing, and it was kind of something that I thought, well, that sounds interesting. But the way he responded was, I'm glad that you told me that because I want to hear that. I want to hear more. Where the natural inclination usually would be for people to shut that down. Well, okay, well, I'll
Yeah,
talk to you about it
absolutely.
after the meeting because we
Yeah,
don't
yeah,
want
yeah.
to let anybody know that the culture here is, and I just thought that was really impressive for him as a leader. But you would not see that in certain college, like the college that I worked at for 6 years. It was a very
Sure.
different culture. It was somebody who identified as very entrepreneurial, the leader, and was that way as long as things were going well. And as soon as something fell apart, there was a different kind
Yeah,
of experience. And you know what I'm talking about. So,
absolutely.
um, but I think that's something that as leaders, we always have to work on, and you can't just rest on your laurels. If you have a good culture, it takes almost nothing to lose that when people stop trusting you, or you can try to get it back. But I always think, that's tough.
Well, you said, I think you and I, before we went online here, we were talking offline. And one of the things that came up for me was hearing you speak about some of the new leaders that are in the pipeline and that or have shown up in the midst of retirements occurring in the sector in itself. The reason why that's important for me is because in doing leadership work, um, I'm always looking at how can we develop adaptive innovation leaders. And to the point that you just spoke about is that a lot of this is a practice. And I think we've counted on
Mhm.
certain leaders to just be kind of special because they just had that level of charisma or they had this level of empathy. And we were just willing to identify them as kind of special when indeed what we do need is to actually develop leaders that can have this as a skill and practice, so that it's just not a someone who is designated as just having that ability, but someone who has the skill and practice to hold space. Because what you were saying earlier about the like a faculty member, like things can get messy, you
Oh,
know,
yeah.
and
Yep.
messiness in creativity and innovation is just a part of the process. But there are certain leaders who feel like they have to manage a certain level of control. command and control. Otherwise, it feels uncomfortable for them. And one of the things I used to do when I was dean, because I do believe that innovation is a practice inside
Mhm.
of organizations, and especially in the community colleges, is that I would set aside some of my my funding, the money that had some flexibility, and I would also create space for faculty members to work on a project for a semester, and I would have some innovation processes, like some design thinking process to help them move their curriculum, to help them investigate and prototype and experiment. And that's one of the things that I think leaders coming up through the pipeline can do a little bit more of. How do you create space that allows for faculty members and program people to engage in developing new things without having to play by the everyday rules, of the campus environment there?
Yeah, I think that I agree with you 100%. I think having frameworks, having even language. I know
Yeah,
one of the most powerful phrases I learned years ago, maybe when you and I were getting to know each other, is that simple question, how might we? Because think of how
absolutely.
empowering that is. First of all, it's got a we in there. So it's
Yep.
not, how can I as an individual do this hard thing? But it's connecting us to another person, but it's taking us to a space of possibility, which is very
Absolutely.
empowering. And I think design thinking is fantastic. We use that. In fact, Amy Schultz, who I think is the person that
Absolutely.
reunited us in this conversation,
Yep.
she taught me a lot about design thinking. I didn't honestly know that much about it. 8 or 9 years ago, I went to a talk on it and I was so intrigued. But it was in the context of a university setting. It was more about facilities and building, but
Hmm.
really identifying a problem. If you think about that, it is can be a really hard thing, but again, empowering, because if at least you know what the problem is, you can begin to ideate and think about solutions and how might we test this. So yeah, I think leaders definitely, by learning those things themselves and by modeling it and kind of back a little bit, you were talking about like the person who looks like the designated leader. Like,
Yeah.
I don't think even in my situation, when I'm out and about, like, I'm just like a community member. I don't think people see me as a president and CEO.
Hmm.
Because I probably don't look like the traditional one if you see people in that job. And I'm okay with that because I've come to terms with who I am as a person and my
Sure.
authentic brand. And sometimes
That's
it
where it
can be a
starts.
tremendous advantage because people will show you who they are and they feel comfortable with you. And then all of a sudden, I've seen this with friends of mine that run large foundations and have access to money and jobs and things like that. You'll notice people treat you differently, even as a
Absolutely.
dean. People that wanted you to hire them to teach classes, it's very competitive to try to get those jobs. They're
Yeah.
going to treat you differently than the people in the grocery store saying, buddy, stand in line. It's not your turn. And I think that's a very humbling thing. So I kind of have thought about that over time. And I'm just excited for more non-traditional kind of path
Absolutely.
people to step into those leadership roles because I think they can be really good at it. More women, more people of color, more people from different experiences in life, and I think that just makes us better as educators and as leaders.
For sure. So let's talk a little bit about your organization, because you guys have some really neat programs there. I think you spoke a bit, and I wanted to follow up with you. You mentioned that you have like a venture fund or something similar to that. Can you speak a little bit about that, as well as some of the other neat programs that you have in your portfolio, should I say?
Yeah, so thank you for asking. So these come under the bucket of innovative action. So we have worked with a husband and wife couple, very generous couple over many years, to stand up an everyday entrepreneur venture fund. So
Hmm.
initially it was funding dedicated, a large amount of funding dedicated to a college to um, you know, make grants to everyday entrepreneurs and
Hmm.
trying to get them some support to start their business. So it might be somebody that needed a set of tools. It might be somebody who needed to do a little bit of research. So it could be anywhere between like $5,000, $10,000. And what we realized over time being entrepreneurial is that if we want to scale that program, we had two choices. We either try to get a much bigger bucket of money and then we have to manage it, and then we, we're not really a foundation, but we are
Yeah.
getting into that role. And so we pivoted with, again, their generosity. And what we have started to do is give out $5,000 grants. So
Mm.
what we're doing, instead of fishing for people, we're teaching them to fish. So we're
Yeah.
giving them
Yeah.
tools and resources and saying, if you work at, like where I am right now, Wake Technical College, we'll give you $5,000 so you can stand up a pitch competition. You can have some flexibility
Nice.
if you need to pay an advisor a little bit of the money. You can buy some prizes, you can figure it out. But the goal is to attract the attention of your local community and to get other funders on board. And
That's
that has
great.
worked very well. And so I think we have close to 50 colleges engaged in that project, and ones that are further along in the process go back and mentor newer colleges. So we do convening calls and that kind of thing. So that's just one example of a program. We have a lot of resources on our website, NACCE.com. We're nonprofit, but our,
You
our
really lots of
website is,
resources. Really is.
yeah. So we've
Field.
got, Verizon Small Business Digital Ready that has videos. So if you don't even have enough money to take a class or you don't have time, you can go on there and learn from the videos. You can apply for just a straight grant from Verizon to help your small business. We have intellectual property resources. We have some teaching and curriculum resources. And then we have different projects. Sometimes we'll get funding that's available for somebody to sort of stand up a coding academy. So
Yeah. Yeah.
we
Yeah.
want to do something along those lines. So we're
Hmm.
always looking for aligned things. What we run into at times is having so many things. We
Yeah.
struggle to learn how to talk about them. So that's kind of our focus now, is to really, get our language crisp. We hired a new marketing director, and to really be intentional about the things that we have. The most recent one is a tech platform called Skill Point with an
That's
E.
what I saw there. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that was provided to us through a charitable donation at the end of 2023. And so it's a career exploration program for the skilled trades. So it really aligns with people that need to upskill, or, from your community college experience, sometimes
Hmm.
you'll get community college student that just falls in love with wanting to be a human, a child care worker or something like
Yeah.
that, where they're not going to probably make the funding that they need to support their family. But you can take a little quiz and it will connect you by zip code to programs that you're interested in. So a person might say, I really love working with people. I want to help people. And then they find out, well, if I'm a childcare worker, maybe I can only make $14 an hour. But if I go to Durham Tech, I can become an occupational assistant. And then all of a sudden my earnings go up to
Sure.
$28 an hour or $35 an hour. And oh, by the way, here's jobs that are in demand and I can apply for a scholarship. So we're excited about that platform. It's expensive to run it. So
Yeah.
again, we're kind of leaning into the entrepreneurial mindset, because when somebody gives you a gift, it's like if somebody gave you a car, you still have to pay for gas for the car. You got to
Yeah.
pay to get new
How
tires
can you
on the car.
scale and all
Got to
that good
scale
stuff?
it. So
Yeah.
so we're in that uncomfortable, exciting place of thinking, how can we make this as a benefit to our members, and like, what does that look like? Because that's traditionally not a role that higher education has, of doing those things. So anyway, that's our
Well,
latest and greatest thing.
well, I think yeah, and I went through it a little bit, and I do really do like the tool, mainly because I think one of the challenges now in the environment that we're in now is how can you close the gap when it comes to matching? Because a lot of times in workforce development, or at least over the years, there's been a lot of different collaboratives done and partnerships that's been really focused in on people closing the gap. And so now with the technology that can really help with the matching, the skills matching, the job matching, the work matching, uh, that's where the innovation comes in to really make things a little bit more efficient, but also bringing people to connect with a range of options that would have taken a long time to figure out.
Right, that's right. I mean, I'll tell you, I volunteer for our Cary Chamber of Commerce board, which I love that organization. It's been so helpful to
Yeah,
us as an organization. I was sitting next to this man, and we were just I was going through the acquisition of skill point. I was talking to him about it, and he's like, "Wow, my daughter, she's working at child care center. She loves little kids, but like she can't even afford to really move out." And I said, "Why don't you ever come over to my office and we'll just do the skill point quiz together?"
hmm,
And she's the one, actually, that was the example I was thinking about her. She found out about the occupational therapy, and she's like, "Dad, I said I wanted to do that years ago, and to become an occupational therapist
sure,
might be something that she can do in 5 years, but she's not there yet. But she can have a step up." And I met some other people at this Workforce Development Institute. I'm sure you've been to that conference,
yes,
and they were talking about nursing seats and nursing programs. And this particular individual said it was their job to like kind of sit with the people that didn't get into the program, and they're crying and they don't know what to do. And like, I don't know what to tell these people because we only have so many seats. But
right,
having a tool like that is really valuable to, and it's free. It's free to the user.
hmm,
Like, where it's not free is like for us, we have to pay for the technology
right,
improvements and all that stuff. But I think to your point, I think you were talking about the future earlier. And I think the future that we're in is things are going to change really fast. So we've got to have the mindset to adapt, not only to adapt to it, but to expect it. And
absolutely,
not, if you
absolutely,
confronted it like, oh my gosh, I don't want anything to change. I want it to be all the same. Well, it's not going to be. So that's the reality that we all have to live through. But how can we leverage some of this constant change and ambiguity and uncertainty and help people that might be left behind to get ahead? And I think technological solutions are really kind of where the action is. But
absolutely.
you still have that segment of people that might still be part of the digital divide. Like, we can't leave those people behind. Like, how do we get them on board? And kind of where we started this conversation, I think community colleges are just the perfect place to do that, because people feel comfortable walking through the doors and trying to find new career occupations and aspirations. So that's, I think, what makes this an exciting time for people like us that are in this space.
Absolutely. So with um so one of the things that you've written or you've been part of, I believe the book was an edited book, so it was made up of a range of different essays or research. Was the book, I think it was called the Community College as Incubators of Innovation.
Yeah.
And I saw your association with that. So, what really kind of sparked my curiosity is really kind of going up to that 30,000-foot level and perhaps coming back down and providing some examples. How are you imagining community colleges as being incubators of innovation?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question, and I'll tell you how that book came to be. Madeline Pumariega, who you may know, who's the president of Miami-Dade College,
Yeah.
he worked for the Florida Chancellor's office, and
Mhm.
was presented with somebody that said, "Oh, somebody should write a book about this." And she had encouraged the one of the publishers to reach out to me. I had never written a book before, but I learned about the process. So it was really an
Sure.
interesting process to learn. But our idea was, we'll go around the country and try to find these pockets of innovation, whether they're in tiny rural colleges like Eastern West Virginia Community and Technical College, which had, a few years ago anyway, about 800
Mhm.
students, so smaller than many high schools, all the way up to these large systems, and
Sure.
massive institutions. And really, it was to try to do exactly what you were talking about, provide stories that would be sticky and resonate with people, to
Mhm.
say, oh, well, if they can do that in Eastern West Virginia Community College, I can certainly do it in Bloomington, Indiana, or wherever
Yeah.
I might find myself. So um, the chapters are written from the perspectives of different people. I had faculty write chapters about some of the topics covered, like, for example, the Everyday Entrepreneur Venture Fund was talked about, and then Gateway Community College, which is part of the Maricopa system,
Yep.
how they really outreach to businesses. And I think it's a good sort of primer and thought provoking piece for people, especially that are in higher education, but maybe they want to figure out, do they not just want to be a transfer institution? Do they want to dive
Sure.
a bit deeper into helping to solve the skills gap? Or some colleges, especially in Appalachia, are tackling social problems like the
Hmm.
opioid crisis. Like, how do I make my campus safe so that, students that have dropped out due to addictions and get their lives together, how can we bring them back but create safe spaces where they can
Absolutely.
succeed? And how do we tackle the debt that they owe? So, it could work from almost like a social entrepreneurship
Hmm.
perspective all the way up to, oh my gosh, we're having this enormous company move into our area. Like, how do we prepare for that? Like, how do we get the
Absolutely.
training program? So I've enjoyed people commenting on that. We've been invited to write a second edition to that book because it sold pretty well.
It's so important.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
we're going to take the approach this time. We decided not to do a companion edition, or sorry, not to do a second edition, but do a companion edition
Hmm.
about based on workforce in the future, because that
Hmm.
book was written from 2017 to 19, and we feel like the world is so different
Oh
now that
yeah.
we almost need to just have something that sits alongside it.
Well,
So
you'll write something for the workforce of the future, and then
yes.
soon after you would have to write something again.
I
That's
know. After I finished that one, I thought, "Oh my gosh, I'm never gonna do that again." And then
yeah,
we did a
yeah,
smaller project, but, I think it's important, what you're doing with your podcast, what we try to do with our work is you don't wanna just keep it within yourself. You wanna inspire other people to take action. There has not been a day that's gone by, in the last almost 16 years that I have not been grateful to work with community college
yeah.
people and doing this work. So, for as long as I'm lucky enough to do it, like I just want to give back and just have met so many good, wonderful people like you along the way. So
Well, your contribution to the practice and running this organization has just been unbelievable. Mainly because we do need to have a platform out there that invites a range of people into the space, where ideas can be exchanged and new types of partnerships can be forged. And that's the reason why I was so glad to hear about the book that was written by you all, because there are so many different models out there. As much as I can be critical of sometimes the stasis of certain community college environments, but there are people out there that are doing incredible things when it comes to programs or colleges. And one of the things you mentioned, I and I really do like this, is that, how can community colleges be problem solvers?
mhm.
Because they are a open platform, that probably has more capacity to invite a lot of different people onto the table, into the conversation. And how can you innovate, from that standpoint? Because I remember when when I had a nursing program, and one of the things I had a whole allied health under us, and one of the things I was really interested in was trying to move them from just seeing themselves as a pipeline for um, the traditional institutions that you would matriculate in terms of employment, from your training, but to really incorporate the community into trying to solve some of those problems where we would have our nutrition people go into the community and, you know, run educational programs at churches,
Oh
you know,
yes,
and so
yes, yeah.
so they would have a chance to like use their skills and also have impact. So if you don't mind, if you can just give me a couple more examples of what you're seeing out there, where your association is partnering and having an impact, where you're driving entrepreneurship and how that's kind of giving an opportunity to scale.
Yeah, so we work on a lot of different, with different colleges in different
Sure.
ways. So, I think trying to get colleges to kind of combine forces. We did something with the Michelson 20 Million Mindset Foundation a couple of
Hmm.
years ago, where their passion is intellectual property curriculum. So they had a
Mm.
curriculum that was developed at a university that was kind of weighty. And so we had Santa Monica Community College kind of step forward working with other colleges, and they developed like a light version and an ultralight version of
Oh,
this so
wow.
that you could
Yeah.
actually take curriculum and you could infuse it into any class. It could be a class, a design class where people need to learn about like trademarks and
Yeah.
that kind of thing. And I thought that was a really creative, something that's going to live on. Um, a couple other community colleges that I think are really doing some fantastic work. I'm thinking about San Jacinto Community College in Texas. Dr. Brenda Hellier, the chancellor there, is on the NACCE board, and they're doing all these cool things, working with NASA and doing space
Yeah.
careers. And every time I speak with her or people there, they're just like dying to share it with other people. Like they're not
Okay.
looking even to get anything out of it, which is the other thing I like about
Sure.
community colleges. So it's programs like that that are kind of cutting edge. We've done things with drones. I'm sure you're familiar with drones.
Yep.
A smaller college, our headquarters are here in Cary, North Carolina, but there's a college, Vance Granville Community College, that's about an hour from here. They've done a lot with drone technology. And
Mm.
so they've done robotics. So it doesn't just have to be like in the tech corridors. But I think what inspires and motivates these folks is the opportunity to share and celebrate what they're doing and to learn, from other people.
Absolutely.
So we do that. One of our big programs I forgot to mention was the pitch for the skilled trades. So the Radcliffe Foundation out of Maryland provides us with $150,000 a year and some travel money. So we have teams of college faculty, deans, presidents sometimes that will pitch an idea. So, like, for example, one idea was at Santa Fe Community College in Florida was a dog grooming business. So they
Mm.
saw the need in their community. They thought could be attached to a mobile dog grooming,
Oh,
which could
wow.
be entrepreneurship. So they pitched that they needed some funding to, do some things to get the program up and going. One of the favorite things out of Snow College was what they created, which was an entrepreneurship project. So it was obviously a farm area where they had a
Yeah.
lot of manure. So they created this composting um, machine is not the right word, but it's a composting device.
Hmm.
And they tested it. So they were pitching, they needed, I forget, like $20,000 for that. And the judges were so impressed, they actually gave them more. They said, well, you maybe
Oh,
because
wow.
you have so much manure, you need to have more composting. But they had so much fun with that at the college. Like they, came up with entrepreneurship t-shirts and hats because people thought that was really funny. But it was kind of like a science high tech kind of thing. And
Yeah.
I think, that's part of the work that I'm trying to do in my organization with colleges today is really kind of this joy of discovery journey, even though
Absolutely.
sometimes it's not joyful because, like, when you're trying to figure something out and there's money involved, or even like probably over time, what you've had to wrestle with enrollments, or
Hmm.
sometimes we have staffing issues and whatnot. But if you can really sort of lean into the fun of it and feeling like you're not doing it by yourself, and if you're willing to share not only the successes but some of the things that went wrong, so we're playing around with that too, to try to get people to really kind of lean into the full
Sure.
experience as a way of just not only celebrating it but learning from things that don't go perfectly.
Yeah, I think getting people comfortable with the process of creativity and not feeling like you have to, be super technical on the front end, because I think a lot of us, especially at the community colleges, um, when enrollment's down, then you have a tendency to go, to some of those tried and true hacks, that will at least get you some type of bump and perhaps get the president off your back or whomever, you
That's
know.
right.
Um, However, I've had these conversations around enrollment and been talking about needing to really raise the level of sense making around things like enrollment, knowing that there are demographic shifts that are taking place that may never have your enrollment look a certain way if you're focusing in on a certain type of demographic or learner. And so the whole ideal of giving yourself a chance to be creative around how to, solve that problem, and like you said, kind of lean into it with a degree of joy. um, I think are ways that these community colleges can come up with some really cool solutions, because it doesn't always have to just be a hard hack for a semester. It could, it can, you can create a much more robust community around
Oh,
solving these
yes.
problems.
And I agree. And I think sometimes not being so incremental, like, well,
Yeah,
we
absolutely.
want to increase this by 2%.
Yep.
Like maybe that's realistic, but like let's have some bigger, more audacious goals,
Absolutely.
because
Absolutely.
it's funny, like even with us, because NACCE's grown a lot over time, but we're still just 14 full-time employees. So
Yeah.
we're not a tiny like two-person operation, but we have these conversations a lot, how we hold each other accountable. And
Hmm.
I have a team of people, right after we're done talking, we're going to have a call. And even though I'm the president and CEO, they hold me accountable because
Yeah.
I said I
Yeah.
would do X. So I can give myself an extension, but like it could slow down what they're doing. And I think it's thinking about things differently and not thinking in the industrial revolution, because that's not really, and you default to that, like I'm sure you do
Absolutely.
as a former dean,
Yep.
like I grew up early in my career, like you got to work at 8:30 and you stayed till 5 and you worked late and you got 2 weeks of vacation, that was the end of it. And like some of those paradigms, especially for working families and everything that we've gone through, sometimes hybrid situations work. And how do you treat people fairly, but you can't treat everybody equally, but you still have to, and that's where it gets back to technology. And
Absolutely.
those are some of the things I see friends in the community college system kind of struggle with, because you've got to
Hmm.
have people on campus. But there might be some jobs where people can do them well, not there. And how do you create an equitable work environment where obviously people aren't resentful that this person does this. And I think we wrestle with that stuff a lot more, because
Sure.
it's not everything is the same.
So speaking of time, you are the CEO of a national organization with a lot of people pulling on you, and I'm sure that you have something right behind us. So I want to close it here and thank you for your time, and really just having an opportunity to reconnect with you, because I see your name pop up and I see you from afar, and I've always been admirer of your work, as well as the contributions that your association provides to community colleges. So I want to definitely say keep on, pushing around the edges, because we do, the community colleges really do need someone to remind them um, that you have to play in a different type of space today. And so I just want to thank
I
you for that.
appreciate that. I appreciate the work you do, and you promised me you would come on our podcast, so I'm gonna take.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely. It's a done deal.
it is a done deal. So
So,
I'll just tell you
so
in closing, my word
yeah,
for the year is gratitude. So I appreciate you thinking of me and inviting me. It's been a great conversation.
thank you. How can people get in contact with, or at least just give the name of the site for NACCE, so that people could see
Yeah,
all the wonderful things
oh,
you're doing there?
thank you for asking. So I would say, visit at NACCE.com, NACCE .com. Also, if you want to take that skill point quiz we talked about,
Yeah.
it's skillpoint with an E.com. I'm on LinkedIn, so Rebecca Corbin. So I'd love to connect with people that way. And go to our website, call our office. I'd be happy to talk to anybody or members of my team. We just have a passion for connecting people and helping people. And I also always encourage people, if you're in a community, maybe you've retired or partially retired, you want to do something really important, you can always connect with your community college. If you have knowledge to share, you
Great
can
point.
teach on the
Yeah.
non-credit side, teach something, you can serve on an advisory board, you can be an adjunct, but there is no, I think, greater joy that I've had even before I worked full time for a community college is just being connected. So I encourage people to do that.
Oh, thank you for putting that out there because I just put a good friend of mine who has a tremendous background and worked for a drone boat company. And he left and he asked, "What can I do with my time?" And I connected him to a community college and just what such a wonderful resource that's in our communities like that. So
Yeah,
thank you.
and
That's a great
adjuncts are
idea.
great. They're
Yeah,
a lot of them are subject matter experts, and they love the student, so they do all of what we try to encourage people to do
absolutely.
is teach, from what you know. So
Yep. Well, thank
thank
you very
you.
much.